Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I, Faraz Naqvi, on the behalf of Institute of Regional Studies, Islamabad, welcome you all on the seminar on very pertinent topic, that is militarization of Iranian politics, a reality or a Western construct. To formally begin the meeting, I would request Mr. Imran Sardar, the Senior Research Fellow of IRS, to begin with his introductory remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Imran Sardar. I'm a senior research analyst at this Institute of Regional Studies. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome a great panel of experts on Iran who will be speaking on militarization of Iranian politics to discuss whether the Iranian politics has really gone militarized or it is just a Western propaganda. So here I must appreciate the efforts of Mr. Faraz Naqvi of Iran program for bringing the eminent speakers to this webinar. For the audience who are joining for the first time, let me introduce briefly about the Institute. The Institute of Regional Studies was established in 1982 with a mandate to conduct unbiased and focused research on Pakistan's neighboring countries that cover defense, foreign affairs, internal politics, and socioeconomic issues. The Institute has its own journal, Regional Studies, published on a quarterly basis. Other publications such as the Spotlight, selections from regional press, Focus, which are available on the website. Coming to the topic of discussion today, militarization of Iranian politics. For me, militarization of politics in its entirety is not that the people who serve in IRGC or military or loyal to the IRGC are being appointed on important position in government functionaries. But it is just like the shrinking space for other political parties. Whether the space for them is there to market their manifestos or not, number one. Number two, whether the dissenting voices are being muted. And number three, politicians, political activities are being pressurized to change their loyalties. So whether this is really happening in Iran is a point of discussion. Western literature, on the other hand, is replete with biasness against Iran. They quantify the militarization of politics by citing people from the military who are now sitting in the government. To further consolidate their argument, they present Iran as an ideal case study of how militarization has failed the reformists and the liberal voices in the country by projecting themselves as the only reliable protector of the country. And this military strategy, what the Western says, of fear and winning the hearts at the same time is continued today. Again, this needs to be discussed, how much substance is there in these Western arguments. So today's discussion is timely primarily for two reasons. One, the nuclear talks are underway, which primarily revolving around the fear of Iranian being going increasingly militarized. Secondly, Ibrahim Raisi, who even before coming to power has been portrayed as a hardliner that indeed multiplied the West's worries for unchecked militarization of Iran and Iranian politics. Given that, today's discussion is very important. So I'm really keenly looking forward to listen to the esteemed panelists and hope the discussion would help separate the facts from the fictions. So I once again welcome all the panelists and the participants to this webinar. Thank you very much, and over to you, Faraz.
Thank you so much, sir, for your remarks. Now I'll move forward to Dr. Umer Abbasi, who will be moderating the session. Dr. Umer Abbasi is basically the assistant professor at Department of International Relations, Faculty of Contemporary Studies, National Defense University, Islamabad. He has the strong grip over the Middle Eastern and specifically on Iranian issues. So he'll be moderating the session and will be introducing the esteemed panelists. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Faraz. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I would like to thank the Institute of Regional Studies, which has considered me to moderate this very, very important panel discussion. And it's an honor for me to be among the distinguished professors and academicians who are going to talk on a very important topic related to Iran. So just like Mr. Imran Sardar has highlighted the importance of this issue, I would just like to share with you the theme that is militarization of Iranian politics, a reality or a Western construct. So since the revolution in Iran, the Iranian political system has remained within the strategic calculations of the Western world, particularly United States of America. In this connection, the role and influence of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has been significantly analyzed, and according to the Western discourse, IRGC has not only been executing the regional agenda of Iran, it has also gradually made inroads into the economic sector and political system of Iran. And this is particularly focused on the recently conducted presidential elections in Iran, in which Ibrahim Raisi has won, who is considered to be hardliner. And after that, the newly formed cabinet has also seen number of people who have affiliations with IRGC. So therefore, this is the Western discourse on which we would be having discussion. But on the other hand, there is the Iranian leadership narrative, which claims that Iran is located in a geopolitical situation in which within its neighborhood, the United States of America and its allies are initiating the strategies which have put Iranian into security dilemma. And that is the reason why Iran has gained strategic space in the neighboring countries of Lebanon, of Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, etc. Secondly, Iran has also blamed United States of America of withdrawing unilaterally from the nuclear deal. And now, in the current negotiations which are going on in Vienna, Iran is demanding assurances for durability of the deal, number one. And secondly, the Iranian leadership also asks for a comprehensive lifting of the sanctions. So within this context, it is very important to understand whether this discourse, the Western discourse of saying that Iran is becoming militarized because of the influence of IRGC on its political system, and particularly they claim that it is one of the aims of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to establish the third stage of the revolution, that is forming of Islamic government. So now the question arises, what would be the effect of this formation of government on the domestic level in Iran? Secondly, how it would be affecting the regional context? And finally, how the global level would be affected, particularly within the context of the nuclear related talks which are going on in Vienna. So these are the primary questions on which our distinguished panelists would be talking about. And now I would briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. We have 4 panelists today. 2 are from within our country, Pakistan, and 2 are our very, very respected guests from foreign countries. So the first panelist is Dr. Syed Qandil Abbas. He is assistant professor at the School of Politics and International Relations, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He has PhD from University of Tehran, and he has a firm grip over the security and political issues of the Middle East, specifically Iran. The second panelist is Dr. Syed Sibtain Hussain. He is also assistant professor in international relations at National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. He has PhD from Warsaw University, Poland, and he has area of expertise in the Middle East, political Islam, and politics of sectarianism. Then we have Dr. Sharam Akberzadeh. The distinguished professor is the research professor at the Deakin University, Australia. He is the author of 3 books and over 40 research papers. And he is also on the review panel of 3 internationally recognized journals. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence here. And then we have Dr. Mehdi Zakerian. He is associate professor at the Faculty of Law and Political Science, Islamic Azad University Sciences and Research Branch. He is editor-in-chief of International Studies Journal, ISJ. I also thank you, sir, very much for your presence here. So we would be starting from Dr. Syed Qandil Abbas. Although he is not present online, his recorded speech would be delivered. So Faraz, if you please upload his speech or his remarks.
Thank you very much. IRS has arranged very good seminar and webinar on very important topic, militarization of Iranian politics, our reality, our Western construct. It is a very interesting topic, and I think very timely addressing very important topic. Actually, sometimes military power considered as an important tool of domestic and international politics. That is why in some countries we have the role of military as an important tool for domestic and international politics. If we consider theoretical perspective of foreign policy making or domestic policy making, sometimes it is based on action and reaction, because in some countries decision makers are usually waiting for some action, and based on that action they present and they try to show their own reaction. So for reaction they need their own policy making, and for this reaction actually main drivers of domestic and international politics, domestic and international policies are playing very important role. So if actions are diplomatic actions, usually we have reactions in the shape of diplomacy. Means if action is diplomatic, reaction will be diplomatic. But if actions are challenging peace and security of some country, so definitely reactions will be militarization of politics, both on domestic or foreign policy levels. That is why during last few decades, we observed that a lot of thinkers analyzing American foreign policy sometimes as a militarized foreign policy, and sometimes even over militarized foreign policy. So that has traveled to different other countries and different other regions. As well as Iran is concerned, I believe to understand the militarization of Iranian politics, we need to understand main drivers of Iranian politics and decision-making process. Right from the beginning, we know that Iran faced full-fledged war That was the 8 years war with Iraq. And during that 8 years, we know that on the one hand, whole Arab world was supporting Iraq. US-led Western countries were also supporting Iraq. And on the other hand, Iran was alone. And during, in this way, during first decade of Islamic revolution, we observed that both Iran's domestic and international and regional politics was dominated by their concerns about peace and security. In this way, actually, the whole Iranian system influenced by military personalities and military strategies. Those commanders who played very prominent role in defending Iran against Iraq, they emerged as a national heroes, and ultimately after their retirement from armed forces, they were welcomed for their role in politics, both on internal and external levels. After their retirement, when they started to play their role both on internal and external politics, that became one of the major source of militarization of Iranian politics. In this way, the legacy of the Iran-Iraq war contributed greatly to militarization of the region in the 1980s, and consequently militarization of politics of Iran as well. So in post 8 years war period, Iran once again confronted several US sanctions, and US sanctions and on the other hand, Western countries were also aligned with US against Iran. And these sanctions usually threatening Iranian security and integrity. So on the one hand, they were trying to isolate Iran in the region, and on the other hand, they were trying to present their idea of regime change in Iran. So both the ideas were directly concerned with Iranian security. So Iranian response was also not solely diplomatic. That was influenced by militarized policies. So Iranian domestic and foreign policy has undergone structural changes over the last few years due to the perception of immediate threats to Iranian national security, which according to Tehran has brought a need for a more assertive domestic and foreign policy. We know that Iran started dialogue with the United States and other world powers in the shape of JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And the main target of Iran was to come out from isolation. But despite signing of this agreement on international level in 2015, after 1 year, US unilateral withdrawal from this JCPOA resulted to once again emergence of militarization in Iranian policies. Observed that and a lot of nuclear scientists, including mastermind of Iranian nuclear program, Fakhrizadeh, was also killed by Israel in Iran. And periodically, we are observing that Iranian nuclear sites are being attacked by Israeli, and sometimes American cooperation is involved. So all these things are in fact showing that Iranian national security is under serious threat. That is why when Iranians are formulating their domestic and foreign policy, in that policy we are feeling that militarized perceptions are dominant. So militarization of Iranian politics is reality or Western construct. I think that somehow it is the reality, but it is overshadowed by Western constructs, because Iran is trying to come out from isolation, and Iran want to play its role in mainstream regional and international politics. If this opportunity is given to Iran, then I think militarized politics of Iran can be decreased. But if sanctions are continuing against Iran, so in future as well, we will observe more militarized Iranian politics, and both on domestic and way forward. I think that external sanctions, mostly sanctions imposed by United States against Iran, must be lifted, and Iran must be included in regional and international affairs. So this can neutralize Iranian military politics. Otherwise, we will have very dangerous scenarios, as we are observing in Yemen, in Syria, in Bahrain, in Lebanon, and a lot of other countries. So I think there must be some way out to include Iran in regional and international affairs. I thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Qandil Abbas, thank you very much for your very important input. And Dr. Qandil Abbas has very nicely structured his argument in action-reaction foreign policy approach, in which, according to his understanding, the use of military and the use of economic statecraft against Iran has basically led to a sort of dominance of IRGC in its political setup, and the sidelining of the moderates and the more influence of hardliners in the Iranian political setup is basically, although it is considered to be a reality, but it is because of the fact that Iran for the last 20 to 30 years has been under severe economic sanctions, and also the military strategy has also been constantly used against it. So now moving further, now I would request Dr. Sibtain to please give his arguments or his take over this important topic. Sir, over to you, Dr. Sibtain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much, Mr. Umer Abbasi. Even though your name is not showing Umer Abbasi, it's Muhammad Shahab. So for that, there was a little bit confusion.
Dr. Saab, it is because I'm using the laptop of my friend Shoaib. That's why my name is not. I'm Dr. Muhammad Umer Abbasi. Thank you very much.
I know you very well that in the National Defense University, Islamabad. Thank you very much, Mr. Umer Abbasi, and also other organizers of this webinar. This is a very important topic, militarization of the Iranian politics. We are neighbor of Iran in Pakistan, and so it is very interesting for us even. Although it is the title of this webinar is it reality or the Western construct, but it's also important for us being Pakistani. Specifically, we are from the academia, so it's very important to have research on this important situation in Iran. It has two aspects. One is internal and other is external. First of all, we have to understand that Iranian revolution is Islamic revolution, and religion is most important point of power in Iran. It means the religion is the most important power, not only in the society, but it's also very important for the politics, because Iranian leaders, they believe that the religion and the politics, they are all together, and even politics is the part of religion. When Iranian revolution brought by the religious people led by the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, so they established the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and this is now most important military power in Iran. Initially, it was a weak force during the Iran-Iraq war, when the commander-in-chief of the then president of Iran, Bani Sadr, at that time, the Iranian army or Iranian military forces, other than the Iranian Revolution Guard, they were powerful, and there were a dispute between the two entities, and then the Bani Sadr was removed, and Ayatollah Khomeini became commander-in-chief of the Iranian military forces. Since then, this military force, Iranian Revolutionary Guard, became powerful, and with the passage of time, it is the most important and most powerful entity among the military forces of Iran, which has three entities. One is the Iranian army, and other is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and third is administrative forces or police in Iran. So, as it was mentioned by the Dr. Qandil Abbas, that Iran witnessed an 8-year war. That was very important, and that war was not between Iraq and Iran. That was the war was on the side of Iraq, that was supported by the all major powers in the world, specifically in the regions, the regional power. They also supported Iraq at that time. So Iran, with its full force, defended its country, and that was very critical time for Iran. And from that time, Iran established powerful circles inside the Iran. Internal situation is also very important, how Iran can have grip over the internal situation, and externally, during recent years, Iran also increased its grip on the regional situation. In Iran, at the moment, the most powerful personality is the Iranian Supreme Leader. And he is also at the same time Commander-in-Chief of the Iranian military forces. And it is not only the Western construct or Western allegation that Iranian Revolutionary Guard has interference in its political affairs, but it's also reality. And there are many reasons. One of the reasons was also indicated by the Dr. Qandil Abbas, that there's international pressure on Iran. And this, if I give example of the military Iranian nuclear deal that was withdrew by the Americans, and that at that time, even the Europeans were supporting this military deal, but practically they followed the sanctions by the United States of America. So this is also one of the reasons that Iran has pressure from the external powers for that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is the most trustable organization of the Iranian government, Iranian establishment. If we compare with the establishment of Pakistan, so in Iran, it is a little bit different. Establishment in Iran that is led by the Iranian Supreme Leader, and this Revolutionary Guard has interference in all sphere of the Iranian political system. For example, there was allegations by the Iranian former president Rafsanjani that in some of the elections, Iranian Revolutionary Guard interfered, and even they have interference in other political affairs of the country. And even you can be witness of the recent Iranian increasing power in the region. Iran military, it was Iranian military forces which supported the Syrian government, and even in Iraq to defeat the Daesh. So it is a reality that Iranian military has interference in the Iranian politics. So this is my point of view, and even if so, in the further proceeding of this webinars, if somebody has questions, so I can answer those questions. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Sibtain, for your very valuable inputs. Dr. Sibtain has highlighted the ideological dimension of the Iranian political system, in which, according to his understanding, there is an influence of the religious ideology. And this religious ideology as a legacy has been taken over by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei from Ayatollah Khomeini, and the gradual influence of the IRGC in the political system of Iran is basically rooted in the ideological foundation of the Iranian political system. So now I would move forward towards distinguished Professor Dr. Sharam Akberzadeh, and I would request him to kindly give his input on this topic. Please, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'd like to thank the Institute for Regional Studies for the invitation. Before I share my understanding of militarization of politics in Iran, I'd like to take issue with the assumption that the 1979 revolution in Iran was an Islamic revolution. That is a myth that the Iranian regime has been promoting. The reality is that the 1979 revolution against Shah was a massively popular revolution that brought in all sections of society with a lot of different ideological and even religious backgrounds. It was only after 1980, when the war with Iraq started, that the clerical aspects of the regime in Iran managed to, in a way, corner power, secure power by eliminating opposing and rival voices within the Iranian politics. So the leftists, communists, liberals, feminists were practically eliminated physically in order for the current regime to take hold of power and really perpetuate the myth of Islamic revolution and Islamic republic. So that's just a little point of difference I'd like to share. But going to the topic of militarization, I think it follows from what I've been saying is that the ruling regime in Iran presents its own interests as national interests. So it projects its own insecurities and projects its own anxieties onto the state. And any threat to the ruling regime are typically presented as a matter of national security, threats to national security. Of course, history of antagonism between Iran and the United States, and most significantly since 2001 war on terror, has really put the Iranian ruling regime on the back foot. When the United States stationed troops on either side of Iran, in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and with President Bush really talking about regime change, it really heightened fears in Tehran that the US was going to move against the regime. And many of you would recall that that concern with impending US action led to a decidedly militant posture in Iran and brought into office Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as the president, who was a firebrand and was supported by the Revolutionary Guards in 2005. And since then, you might argue that the Revolutionary Guards have retained their significance in politics, have retained a lot of power within the establishment, but the deciding factor, and I think the most significant aspect of Revolutionary Guards' role, in Iranian politics is what role they play in Iran's foreign relations. And that is really, it really highlights the role of Revolutionary Guards. The war in Syria is proof for the Iranian leadership that the United States has not given up on this idea of regime change, that the United States is still very much committed to toppling regimes that challenge US hegemony in the region. So the fight in Syria and Iran's support for Bashar al-Assad is really presented as a matter of national defense. When the United States supported proxy forces, proxy actors against Assad regime. And in fact, the rise of Daesh is also ascribed as a US plan to remove Assad and then move towards Iran. And the anti-Shia, very much pronounced anti-Shia message of Daesh is always seen by the leadership in Iran as evidence that the United States has not given up on its idea of regime change and is really committed to toppling the regime in Tehran. So this has led to the doctrine of forward defense, and I've just shared a recent publication in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone sees that, where the Iranian regime considers the use of its proxy forces in the region as a matter of preventing or stalling or deterring action against Iran proper. So there have been many direct quotes from Iranian officials where they say fighting in Syria is more important than fighting in Khuzestan within Iran, because if we can defeat them there, they will never actually get to Iranian territory. So it's all seen. So Iran's promotion of sponsorship of proxy actors like Hezbollah, like Fatimiyun, who are Afghan fighters, like Zainabiyun, who are Pakistani Shia fighters. The recruitment of these foreign fighters and their use in the Syrian theater of conflict is seen as a matter of preventing conflict within Iranian territory. So a matter of forward defense. So the problem with the doctrine of forward defense is that it really gives free rein to the Revolutionary Guards. The Revolutionary Guards, as we have heard, are only answerable to the supreme leader. The Revolutionary Guards are not answerable to the government of Iran. And that actually creates a lot of tension, and also highlights the peculiarities of the Iranian political system, where the armed forces are not accountable and answerable to elected representatives, to the elected government. So I guess this is something we can come back to during the question and answer, the Q&A. The peculiarity of the situation and the irony of the situation is not lost to Iranian commentators. It's not lost to Iranian politicians. Many of you will recall that former Foreign Minister Mahmoud Javad Zarif gave an interview, supposed to be a secret tape interview, but it was widely circulated, where he talked about how Iranian foreign ministry had its hands tied behind its back when it came to issues of war in Syria and elsewhere, because if they were considered as security threats, national security threats, then the Revolutionary Guards had free rein. They could do whatever they want without the foreign ministry being involved. So what he said was an open secret, but it was unusual for an Iranian official to actually say it publicly, so significant in that sense. Another example of how the Revolutionary Guards has autonomy and independence of action from representative elected government was when General Qasem Soleimani visited Moscow to meet President Putin in 2015. And that was just on the eve of the Russian commitment to war in Syria. And it's quite unusual, and it's definitely not protocol to have a general meet a head of state. a foreign general meet the head of state. But Soleimani was not just a general. Soleimani was representing the head of state in Iran. So that hence the connection and hence the meeting that he managed to secure. Again, highlighting the independence of the Revolutionary Guards. So what's happening in the region is that the region is quite hostile towards Iran. Iranian leaders are anxious about their prospects, and the knee-jerk response of the leadership is to invest in asymmetrical mechanism of warfare. Ballistic missiles is an issue that Iran has been investing in that technology. Cyber warfare is another area Iran has been investing in. And of course, proxy actors is the most documented and the most discussed. And it's a topic that I have also explored in my research. So this notion that that Iran is under threat, that Iran needs to be self-reliant, that Iran needs to stand on its own feet, and it's often called resistance economy or axis of resistance. There are variations of the term. Is really driving the strategic thinking in Iran, and it's really providing the opportunity and the freedom and autonomy to the Revolutionary Guards to operate and in a way dictate Iran's foreign relations in the region. The problem with this is that Iran's behavior, even though it is argued to be defensive, is not seen as defensive. It's seen as quite aggressive in the region. And it has led to an arms race. It has led to a security dilemma where countries in the region, like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, feel threatened and really anxious about Iranian agenda. So they invest in high-tech weaponry, major purchase of weaponry from the United States, and creates an arms race, which then again feeds into Iranian sense of vulnerability and the need for vigilance and the need for a constant state of readiness for conflict, for war. The domestic implications of this constant fear of being attacked, existential threat, the domestic implications are of course immense. The political system in Iran is closed. It's a very closed system with the supreme leader as the head of state, appointing his loyal allies to position of authority and weeding out potential threats. Some of you will remember that two presidential candidates in 2009, Mehdi Zakerian and Hussain Mousavi, who challenged Ahmadinejad, are still under house arrest in Iran. Former President Khatami is practically banned from speaking in public and his image being shown in public. So the state, the ruling regime, which has control of the state, is very concerned about alternative views, competing views within the state, because it is constantly referring to an outside threat, an existential threat emanating from the United States and its regional allies. I wouldn't call Iranian politics as militarized politics. I think Iranian politics has a lot in common with other repressive regimes. If you look at China, if you look at Saudi Arabia, they have extensive use of the security agencies to silence opposition. So it's very much in that category of being an authoritarian repressive regime. But I think the Revolutionary Guards have made a very significant impact on militarizing Iranian foreign relations and regional relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shahram. You have very pertinently described the overall situation inside Iran. Framing your argument in security dilemma theory, you have explained that it is because of the fact that Iran has under security dilemma at the regional level, and that has caused the influence of the Revolutionary Guards in the political system. And in self-defense or in the defense of the state security or regime security, definitely the Iranian system has to depend upon the Revolutionary Guards for not only executing the regional agenda, but also for having influence in the important political setup inside the country. Now, we would move to our last distinguished speaker, and I will request Professor Dr. Mehdi Zakerian to kindly share with us your valuable take on this important topic. Ji sir, Dr. Mehdi Zakerian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to your institute and thank you to Faraz. Please let me to say my hellos to my colleagues there, especially to my colleague, Professor Akberzadeh. I benefited from the speech of the speakers. And about this subject, if we look around Iran, we found a lot of conflict. Most conflicts in our region, they are not from the region, they are coming from abroad. For example, the problems of the Iran in World War I and in World War II, they imposed some problems for Iranian peoples. After that, if we look to the Middle East region, Israel had started to occupy the land of the Arab countries. So it's continue even right now, if we look there. So I can say that the region is militarized. We cannot say that what is the image of Iran? Iran is the militarization of Iran is a reality or a Western construction. I think the reality of the Middle East region is a militarization situation. So within this region, Iranian people, they try to send the message of dialogue and to have a good relation with all neighbor countries. If we look around us, Iran is a long country that not made war against its neighbor in the past 200 years. So this is a very important that Iranian people, they didn't start any war against their neighbors. Despite this reality of the Iranian people, we see after the Iranian Revolution, foreign countries, they supported one of our neighbors to start a conflict against Iran. And this conflict became like a war with the duration of the 8 years. In that period, we see all of our neighbors, including Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other Arabian countries in the Persian Gulf, they supported Saddam because Iranian people, they started a new political system. And with this new political system, they wanted to present some ideological and some idea, which is very normal that any revolution become in the power, they try to export these ideas or these values to the other countries. So the neighbors and so the foreign powers, they wanted to stop Iranian ideology. They supported totally Saddam regime. And after that, if we look to Iranian political system, they tried to make a construction of the Iranian economy. So we didn't find any index or any significance of militarization after the war in the Iran. If we remember late President Rafsanjani, he tried to push Revolutionary Guard to make some economic activities in Iran. And they started to do economic activities. If you look to Qarargah Khatam, or the activity of the one department of Revolutionary Guard, they are active in industrial, in economic, even in business. So the decision in the political system was to push the military department of the Iranian government to be active in the issue of the reconstruction of Iran, not to push the military department to change Iranian regime to a militarization regime. So it was the reality of Iran. But after that, after Mr. Rafsanjani, we look, Mr. Khatami even, he came with a dialogue message, dialogue of civilization. But the reaction of this activity is very important. The reaction by the Western countries toward Mr. Rafsanjani was negative. The reaction by the Western countries to Mr. Khatami also, it was a negative. Bush declared that Iran is the axis of evil. Bush declared that we look for the change regime in Iran. And after that, even the IAEA declared that Iranian activities is peaceful activities, and Iran accepted the deal in the Berlin and in Paris with the EU countries. United States didn't accept, and they rejected the deal between Iran and the EU countries. So the situation, I want to say that the situation is a situation of imposing or pushing Iran to be a military country. In fact, Iranian people and so Iranian regime, both of them, they understood that Western countries and also our neighbors, they didn't want that Iran follow a peaceful relation with the other countries. For example, in the conflict between Iran and the United States, our neighbors, including Turkey and Pakistan, they benefited from this conflict for themselves. In the period of the sanction also, nobody, I mean, any countries, they wanted to respect the resolution of the Security Council, which supported nuclear deal. So it shows that if you stay only on your activity for political development, for economic development, and for cultural development, the foreign countries, they don't want to accept this activity by Iran. So a part of Iranian regime, I mean Revolutionary Guard, they decided to add or to increase their military activity. So they look to the missile as a reality for a defense of country. They look to increase their activity on the drones. And so they follow their activity on the Department of Quds, Department of Revolutionary Guard. So they are the reality of the region and of the international system, which imposed Iran and one of the Iranian part to become more and more military and to increase their military activities. Thank you, sir. This is my speech about your subject.
Grateful, Dr. Mehdi. You have very pertinently explained your point of view. And by using the lens of structural realism, you have explained that the state's actions are basically shaped because of the structural phenomena. And since Iran is living within the conflict region of the Middle East, and there is militarization elsewhere in the region also, so it is also shaping the Iran's behavior in a militant way. And this is also one of the reasons why Iranian domestic setup is also being seen as apparently becoming more and more militant. And it is because of the fact that Iran, particularly after the revolution, is a security state. Thank you very much, sir, for your very, very important input. Now, I'm thankful to all the panelists for their very, very important discussion on this topic. And now I would like to ask those people who have joined us as audience to have any question. If you people have any question, just raise your hand. So somebody has raised. Ji sir, Imran Sardar Sahab, please ask the question.
Thank you very much. As most of the panelists more or less agree that the insecurity situation in the Middle East is the catalyst behind the IRGC's increasing role in the politics. So my question is that how long will it continue? Would it be a business as usual unless and until the situation surrounding Iran is improved? One thing. And secondly, I just wanted to know the nature or the status of the civil-military relationship in Iran. How the people perceive the kind of militarization in the country. Thank you very much.
Ji Imran Sahab, whom are you asking this question to?
I would be interested to know from the Iranian perspective.
Ji. Dr. Mehdi or Dr. Shahram?
Indigenous.
Would you please? Okay. Dr. Mehdi, I think you would be in a better position to answer this question of Mr. Imran Sardar.
Yeah. If you look to the Iranian people, I think that Iranian people, they don't like the activities of the Revolutionary Guard to intervene in all departments of Iranian political system and Iranian economic system. This is the reality that we see in Iran. But look to the ideas of the Iranian peoples 2 years ago. When Trump regime, the withdrawal from the JCPOA or nuclear deal, the Iranian people, they confirmed 100% the Iranian revolutionary. So if we want to look the symbol, this protection of the Iranian people from the revolutionary guard, and the ceremony of Soleimani. So it proves that the Iranian people, they are angry about the reaction of Trump against their deal. So I want to say that Iranian people, they look to their situation, but they understand that there are some reason by foreign countries that revolutionary guard become more active in Iranian political issues and Iranian economic issues. So this is the reality of the internal reality of the Iran.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mehdi. Now, Ji Maham Khan, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, sir. So my question is for Sir Sharam. I wanted to ask if the failure of the Vienna talks do occur, do you think the militarization will be consolidated?
Dr. Sharam.
So before I respond to that question, can I please invite people who are not speaking to turn off their mic because it's disrupting the audio.
Kindly mute your microphones.
Yes, so I think that's a difficult question, and I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not sure how I can tell the future. But the reality is that the revolutionary guards in Iran are not going to forfeit their position if there is an agreement in Vienna regarding the nuclear program. There are concerns, and I think there are some warranted concerns, that if there is a nuclear deal and Iranian nuclear program is put under very strict inspection regime, unprecedented inspection regime, then there are benefits that will flow to Iran, economic benefits, that Iran will come out of sanctions, and then that will indirectly benefit the revolutionary guards, because that would free up Iranian assets that could then invest in various activities, and one of them might be, and very likely would be, the Revolutionary Guards. So the Revolutionary Guards will benefit from the sanctions relief. That's not a reason to argue against the nuclear deal. It's an argument for building on the nuclear deal and expanding to other areas of negotiation. So trying to affect Iranian behavior in the region, not by slapping sanctions on it, but by including it. I think one of my panelists mentioned that, by including Iran in regional security structures, that will go a long way in allaying that sense of insecurity and vulnerability, and would bring down that anxiety about the survival of the regime. So it's a bit of a mixed response to your question. I'm sorry if I cannot be very clear cut.
I think, sir, the job has been done. You have very perfectly addressed this question. Any other question from the audience, please? Okay, so now we are going to conclude this panel discussion. The main question is that whether the militarization of the Iranian political system is a Western construct or reality. According to the discussion which has taken place, although there is a Western discourse that Iranian political system has militarized, and there is some substance to it also, but overall the panelists have agreed that this is not something which is an inward-outward explanation. More of it is an outward-inward explanation, in a sense that Iran's geopolitical location and the way it has been dealt with, not only by the global powers, particularly United States of America, but also the regional states, have given a space to this militarized phenomena, not only we are seeing it at the regional level, but also we have seen it at the Iranian domestic political setup, particularly in the form of sidelining of the moderates and coming up of the hardliners. For instance, within the previous government, when Hassan Rouhani, who was a moderate, he was ruling, and one of his great achievements was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. However, it was the unilateral withdrawal of United States of America, which again gave a justification and excuse to the hardliner elements within a society to sideline Hassan Rouhani, and in place of him, a hardliner president came into the office of the president. But that does not mean that the closed system of Iran and the other human rights records, which is related to this regime, would not be avoided in the future. If Iran wants to get this away, this tag of militarization, it has to internally also do some reforms and to put things in order, just in order to give a very, very positive picture of Iranian society on the basis of his very, very great past and civilizational aspects, which needs to be highlighted. But if they still wear the cloak of this militarization, then definitely there would be reactions coming from the regional and the external level. So this is, I think, to my understanding, is the overall crux of this discussion which has taken place. I am again very, very thankful to Dr. Qandil Abbas, Dr. Syed Sibtain Hussain, and particularly very, very grateful to our distinguished professors in Australia, Dr. Sharam Akberzadeh, and also Iran Professor Dr. Mehdi Zakerian, for sparing their valuable time and awareing us about this very, very sensitive and important topic. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and also to Institute of Regional Studies.